Hi, so we've been talking about making bold decisions, and in discussion about this, we were thinking, are they really bold? Are they really courageous? Or are they just big decisions that look bigger than a normal decision? So we want to discuss this, and we're going to have two parts to this. One is starting with um, you. How do you make a big decision? How do you make sure that you're not upsetting everybody, that it feels like you're going against the grain? And so how do you know your own mind? Do you get firm about knowing your own mind? Okay. And the second part will be, when you've made up your own mind, how do you get other people on board with your decision even when they're dead against it? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's get Matt on board and let's have today's discussion. Where would you like to start with this one?
I think sort of the starting point is really just this whole notion of a big decision, and I guess the kind of decisions we're talking about are things like which career path to take, whether to continue studying in the way that you might originally have envisaged, what course to take if you are studying. And I guess my observation to start with is, as soon as something has taken on the category of big decision, you're already going down a less helpful track, because implicit in that way of thinking about it is the fact that there's something serious at stake. You've decided, or other people have decided, that there's something serious at stake here, and generally that might be your future success or your future happiness, or how you're going to look to other people in the world, and I'm sure there's others as well, but the more that you've got on something, the harder it can be to just access the natural sort of clarity and common sense you have about, well, does this make sense or does it not make sense? And I guess what we'd like to suggest and explore is really, like, is a big decision any different from any other decision you might take in the day? Like, which route am I going to take for my walk this morning, or what am I going to have for my dinner, which sounds probably hard to take if you're facing one of these big decisions, but hopefully we can help shed some new light on that.
Yeah, and it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? Because if you call it a big decision, or other people call it a brave or a bold decision, then immediately there's lots of thinking about that, and so it then begins to feel more weighty. There's more on it. There's more thinking around it, and the more you think, the more you feel. So it becomes a weightier decision, and it's a funny thing that we should even think that you can hold a decision in your hand and it can weigh more than any other sort of decision. But if when you have a lot of thinking on it, it seems to take up more bandwidth, and that seems to feel a bit heavier than something else. But as you say, making a decision of whether to wear black trousers or blue, or chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream, it's all ice cream. It doesn't matter whether it's chocolate or vanilla. There's a preference, but it doesn't matter. It's all ice cream, you know?
Well, I think one of the interesting things is we all have a sort of a set of rules for, like, what we do in the case of big decisions. Like, we have our rituals or things we do that we think are helpful, and actually a lot of the things that we think of doing, which for a lot of people are researching it a lot, talking about it a lot, writing pros and cons. I mean, you can see gazillions of articles on sort of techniques for helping you make decisions. A lot of them are counterproductive, and in fact take you further and further away from the only thing that's ever helpful in making a decision, which is you checking in with your internal guidance system, which is like, well, which way shall I go? Which way shall I go?
Yeah, and that's why talking to other people confuses the decision, because what you're hearing in their advice, in their good intentions for you, is their idea of what a good decision would be, their idea of how it would fit with their rules, their vision of how life should be played out,
Yeah.
not yours. So you're checking in with someone else's vision of the world which has nothing to do with yours, and so it's it, it's almost never helpful unless you're just getting neutral information. It's almost never helpful to take advice. It's just more confusing, because that adds another layer of concern and worry. Well, if they wouldn't do it, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm the mad one for thinking this is possible. Everyone else is telling me it's not. And, you know, half the world would never have been invented if people had listened to other people's poor advice.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a really, really important and helpful distinction, which is, yeah, speaking to people for information where there is a gap in your information. And often, you know, for most of us, most of the time, we have our made up idea of what something will be like. You know, we're not going to know what studying X, Y, and Z will be like. We're not going to know what working in, you know, X, Y, and Z jobs. So there's a degree to which just having some more input and information to help us sense check that imagined reality can be helpful. But I think the pivotal thing is, if you think you're going to get the answer, often there's like this, what's the answer? Tell me the answer. I'm so confused. Tell me the answer. Like, if we think that answer is going to come from out there, from that conversation or that piece of information, I just need some more information and then I'll know. That's just, you know, we all know, we've all been in those situations where we just get, the more we know, the less we know type thing.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, yeah, it's having that awareness that information gathering, and sometimes sounding other people out whose opinions that we really respect, who might have some insight about something that we can't yet have, that's helpful. But ultimately only we can really know whether it makes sense for us. That's just super helpful to know.
Yeah, and I think there's something about, you know, you know when you know. So I have been in positions where I have had to make a big decision, and I might have even at the time written a list of pros and cons, you know, that seemed like a good idea at the time, and they've sort of come out quite equally balanced. But when someone said to me, you know, right, we're going to flip a coin. This is not working. We're going to flip a coin, and it flips and it lands. Immediately, my heart knows as it lands that, oh God, it's that one. I didn't want that one really. And in fact, when I'm asking for people's advice, when I'm asking for people's opinions, in general terms, I usually already know. My mind's already made up, and I'm just going through the process of justifying the decision I've made. But actually, my mind was already made up. My heart was already set on something. And some of the upset we have about decision making, to my mind, can be that we're trying to dissuade ourselves from something we already know to be true.
Yeah,
That doesn't quite
sometimes
fit comfortably with others.
the right decision has some implications that
Yeah,
look quite uncomfortable.
that look uncomfortable or
Right.
that other people don't like. But actually, I've already made my mind up, and now I'm just going through the process of trying to justify that to me or other people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know?
No, I think that's true. And 2 points occur to me. So one is, absolutely, when I talk to other people now about a decision I'm trying to make, what I'm listening for is my reaction to what they have to say. Like the coin flipping example, I'm listening for, where does my feeling state go? What happens in me when I hear them talking about it? Does it make me get more busy and concerned or whatever, or does it kind of reflect back what I think I already know? So that's one thing. And the other thing is, like, I think we have this kind of inbuilt bias or orientation, which is like, especially with our big decisions, like, we think that there's no going back. It's like that once we make this decision, you know, my life is decided for, you know, for forever. And what I've found is kind of, I guess, sort of two things. One is kind of, as soon as you've made a decision, whichever way you go, generally you know pretty quick whether it's right for you, because often a lot of the thinking that we've had on our minds about it falls away as soon as we've started to take action in a particular route, and from there we're better to discern for us whether it still feels like the right thing to do, or actually, you know, it actually feels like we're making a mistake. And Christine, I think you had a great example of this that you mentioned before, where you really thought you wanted to do a particular piece of further study, and then when you got in the room to to sign up, whatever, you realised it wasn't for you.
Yeah. And I thought I'd wanted that degree for an awfully long time. I mean, 25 years. And when I finally went ahead, signed up, did all the applications, had to write essays to apply, and did all of that, when I got the offer of a place and I went to the offer day and sat in the room and listened to them talking about the course, I knew immediately that this wasn't what I wanted, and I didn't need to do it, and that actually all I really wanted was to know that I could, and I didn't actually want to do the course at all, and I didn't want to waste 3 years of my life discussing philosophers or whatever it was I was studying. And the same thing happened to my son. He was told right through school he was really good at philosophy, that he should, that's part, and it looked like he was really good at it and that's what he should follow. So he did it. But when he got there, I think he very quickly realized that the course was sort of going nowhere and it wasn't that interesting. And it certainly wasn't as interesting as the debates and things he'd had going on at school. And then he took what looked to lots of people like a bold choice to change not just to a different philosophy course, but to change to maths and computer science, which was a completely different discipline. And it took, nothing is irreversible. It did take him an extra year of university because he had to drop back a year, but it was the best thing he did. And if he'd then got into the maths and computer science course and a year down the line it had been the wrong one, he still could have changed his mind again. And there's nothing that can't be reversed apart from, murder one or whatever. But, fundamentally, there's nothing that is irreversible, And I don't think people say that enough. I think people do put more pressure on by saying, well, if you do this, that's 5 years of your life or whatever. It isn't, never is. You can turn around and go back the other way easily.
I think it's part of that myth we pointed to around the track, isn't it? It's like sort of, oh yeah, you've got to make the right choices of what subjects you're going to study. You've got to make the right choices of degree because this is going to determine your future. It's part of that same sort of orientation, that there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And as you say, it's like sort of there's, generally speaking, it's far easier to sort of undo a bad decision if you see that it's the wrong thing for you, sort of fairly quickly. And then even if it takes you a long time to work it out, you're going to learn shitloads in the meantime. It's just your path's taken a slightly different direction. You're going to see stuff on that route that you wouldn't have seen kind of otherwise. And if you're starting with this awareness that there's no set place to get to, there's no track to get there, there's just what makes sense to me right now. There isn't like we talked about with a track, it's not that you've fallen off the track, you made a bad decision and so your life is going to go the wrong direction. It's just, well, you've gone this way and you've got to check in and regroup and, well, what makes sense now? And then what makes sense now? And it's a series of sort of moments and episodes and sequences that only looking back has a narrative to it. But there's no future you're living into. There's just what makes sense now. And although it's as I say, it's probably hard to hear if you're in the throes of that big decision. In a way, making decisions is something we do a million times a day without thinking about it. And it isn't as hard as it looks, except when, we layer on all this meaning to it.
Yeah. And in fact, almost making decisions is a process almost of eliminating what doesn't work. You're constantly eliminating what doesn't work by choosing a route, taking it and going, oh no, that wasn't the right one, and then moving off onto the next one. That doesn't work. Okay, that's not the right one. Onto the next one. And you're constantly through life eliminating what doesn't work to get to what does. But there's no straight route to what works. There's always that process of eliminating what doesn't along the way. And you can only do that by trial and error.
I love what you're saying, because what occurred to me is like, if the starting point is, well, how could I know? How could I know until I've done it, I've experienced it? it kind of frees you up to just go with your best sense of what, you know, what's the right thing to do right now, because that's more the truth of it. It's like, of course we don't know. Like, I didn't know what my degree was going to be like until I'd experienced it. Same as you describing with your son. Any role I've taken, I've only been able to go on like the, you know, the sort of the wisdom, the instincts, the what I could see at the point of embarkation. I can't know what it's going to be like. I don't know what it's going to be like in, you know, sort of 2 days, let alone 2 months or 2 years.
And that's the fast of bold decisions, isn't it? That, you know, how can you expect someone who at the moment is doing geography from a textbook for an A level to know whether they're going to really love and enjoy geography at the level of university until they get there and try it? They're just not going to know, you know. I think there is one more thing that we need to address, because it will come up tomorrow when we talk about this further. But the other thing is that when people say to you, oh, that's bold, that's courageous, that's a big decision, they are seeing that big decision through the lens of their own fear. To them, that feels like something they would never do. To them, that feels like something other people don't do. To them, that feels like a decision that goes against the grain of what society should do. And it's their fear you're hearing, not yours. It's not a comment on you or your idea, or whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. You're hearing their own experience of what that feels like for them.
And I think it can go the other way probably as well. It's like if you're, you know, your social group, your mates are people who say, oh yeah, of course, fuck it, do it. Why wouldn't you? It's just the same thing in reverse. It's someone else's reality, someone else's relationship to the kind of thing that you're dealing with, which can be just as misleading, because you don't go with what feels true for you. You go with, you know, the prevailing thinking of, you know, whatever, you know, sort of ever people that you tend to kind of listen to or be influenced by.
Yeah. And everything you do in life, even for every moment you step out the door, everything has a risk. And all you can ever do is weigh up the risk that's acceptable to you, not the risk that's acceptable to somebody else, only the risk that's acceptable to you. That's all you can do. There isn't anything else.
I don't think I've got anything to add. The only thing maybe I'll finish with is kind of, I think what we tend to think isn't available in education, which is more obviously available in, you know, in the professional world, is just experimentation as a valid way, like a way to test your instincts and your, you know, a kind of a hotter colder exercise. And I think it's just, you know, sometimes we just don't know. Like sometimes even if we, you know, we don't feel that we're overloading the decision, sometimes we just don't know. And you know, when you don't know, all you can really do is try some stuff. And you know, sort of you know, whether it's, you know, making choices about educational things or anything else, it's just, I think sort of it's because we think we should know, or that people should know. We often maybe aren't as open to just experimenting and trying stuff to help us feel our way rather than think our way to, you know, more clarity about what the right thing for us is. So if I had a final thought, maybe it's kind of, yeah, where you really don't know, where actually you've kind of you that's where you've settled, that's the position, that's where you're at. Then it's kind of, well, okay, so if I don't know, what are the kind of things I can experiment with and try that might, you know, help me know better.
Yeah. And that real, you know, that looks and feels real, that seductive issue of, if I think my well-being is attached to the outcome of the decision, then it's going to feel weightier, heavier, bigger, more difficult to make than if it's just an exercise in this or that, vanilla or chocolate, and there's nothing attached to it, because I know without a shadow of a doubt that I'll be okay if it works out, and I'll be okay if it doesn't. And I think that we underestimate too much. We give too much weight to, I'll only be okay if it works out okay. and not enough weight to I'm already okay and I'm about to make this decision. They're separate things. My well-being isn't attached to the outcome of the decision. Never was and never will be.
So there's a lot in there. If there was one thing you wanted to kind of draw out to leave people with, what would be the thing that's been most helpful for you in this whole area?
Excuse me. What's been most helpful to me at all times is that I'm okay if it goes my way and I'm okay if it doesn't.
Yeah, for me, I think it is just that that point is that if I'm treating it like a big decision, it means there's something I'm not seeing about what I've put on this, or other people I've taken on of other people's thinking about what this thing means, and I'm forgetting that that actually it's no more or less than any other routine choice that I'm making, and that's my clue to do what I see as helpful to help me maybe sort of regain perspective.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So tomorrow we're going to have a look at once you've made that decision or you've come to some sort of decision, how you communicate that with people who disagree, who say they have your best interests at heart, but are a sort of feel like they're holding you back. So how do you, once you've made a decision, how do you communicate that to people in a way that gets them on board? Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, I'll see you tomorrow.